Right. Hey, thanks for joining me. We had some technical difficulties there. The app froze up. I'm Ryan Backman, founder and executive director of Project Cold Case. Joining me this evening is Katie Jeffries, First Coast News. Katie, how are you?
Hey, good to see you guys again.
I know. We are not big fans of not being able to get together and do this, but that's the world we live in right now, and so we're making the best of it. We got this little app that allows us to at least be on the same screen at the same time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And at least we get to still cover some of these cases.
Exactly. So first off, out of the gate, I don't even know if we've had you on since you announced you were pregnant. But
Yep.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Excited. And now that's coming up really quick. And I would imagine there's a little bit of anxiety that goes along with being a first time pregnant mom during COVID-19, right?
It's been quite the experience.
Yeah.
It's been interesting going to the doctor's offices. My husband, unfortunately, hasn't been allowed to come to the ultrasounds. Um, but about a month left to go. So it's been quite the journey in this 2020.
Yeah. Well, lots of stories to tell for sure. So, well, thanks for joining us. I know you got a lot going on right now, and preparing and nesting, and all of those things. We're excited for you. We can't wait for the baby to come. You do know what it's going to be, right? Are you?
Right. It's going to be a boy.
Yeah, but no names publicly yet, right?
Not yet. We're holding back on revealing the
Yeah.
name just yet.
Yeah, we did that too. In fact, we had like a list of names. We hadn't settled on one until the nurses got kind of snippy about it in the hospital. Like, both of our kids had been born and were nameless for a day or two before we came up with names. So it was. But that's part of the joy, is being able to make the big announcement all at once. And my wife was adamant that she did not want anybody else's opinion on a name prior to having it official. She said, "I don't need anybody telling me, oh, I hate that name. My so and so was named that, and I never liked them." So
I feel like it's already done. Ink's dry on
yeah,
the paper.
yeah. I always say, it doesn't bother me what people say. So anyway, Katie, today we were going to talk about the Mark Brotherton case, and this was probably the oldest case we've done on Unsolved, that you've done on Unsolved, 1971.
I think so, because I know we did, of course, the girls that went missing in
Yeah, in 74.
1974, but
Yeah.
I do think this is probably the oldest at 1971.
Yeah. And this was one that you interviewed the victim's daughter here at our office
Mhm.
a while back. Do you remember when? I didn't look to see when we did
It
that
was
story.
probably a year and a half ago at this point.
Yeah.
It was a
It's
little
been a
while.
little while. I remember, and I'm going to try to, if I can work this technologically here, if I can show my skills. I'll play the segment that you ran on First Coast News, but this one was the first one out in Lake City, out a little bit outside of Jacksonville. You went out there. You had a really good interview with the detective. He was super helpful, gave all kinds of information, gave a great interview, gave descriptions of the suspects. There was, we'll play the video, but Mr. Brotherton owned a gas station, and a couple guys came in and robbed, shot him and another customer, and then fled. And so there was a really good description. Anything before we play the video that that stuck out with you about that interview or going out there to Lake City?
I think what was one of the parts that I felt was really important was, they felt that these people who committed this armed robbery, which became a murder, had probably done it before. But
Yeah.
because the records were so old, they didn't have records still from armed robberies back in the 1970s. Of course, they had held on to murder files, but they
Right.
didn't have the armed robbery files. So they said if there was retired law enforcement and these guys, the description sounded familiar to them,
Yeah.
to reach out to them and talk to them about that, because a detective who is probably retired now, but from 1971, who worked armed robberies, maybe these descriptions sounded like someone he had covered before.
Absolutely. You know, we always, law enforcement, they're always asking us to get the public's input and insight and if they remembered anything. But it was interesting to hear him say, I'm kind of hoping that some retired law enforcement sees this, you know, and hears this because like you said, all those case files were gone, and they seem to have a pretty, you know, standard MO for going in and robbing a gas station. So let's I'm going to bring up the segment here, and before I do that, I'll show you this one. Mandy Wrigley up in South Carolina saying hi.
Oh, hi, Mandy.
Yeah, I think you did her son's case,
Yep.
Brian Wrigley, a while back too.
Ago.
You know,
3 years maybe.
Yeah. So, all right, let me show this video and let me see if I can get this to work.
Mark Brotherton's daughter remembers the night the home phone rang at 4 a.m. She remembers seeing her mother cry as she wrote down an address. It was the address to the coroner's office. But the phone call she has never gotten is the one telling her that someone has been arrested for her father's murder. But she's hoping that maybe now that will change.
I can't imagine after all this time, somebody hasn't told the story to someone, somebody hasn't confessed to someone.
Time hasn't faded Laura Collins' memory of her father, Mark Brotherton, a World War II veteran who served under General Patton and a founding member of Mandarin United Methodist Church, but most of all, a devoted husband and father.
He would put me on his tractor and I'd ride around on the tractor with him while he was baling the hay.
After retiring from JEA, Mark Brotherton opened a gas station at the corner of US 441 and I-10 in Lake City. On July 29, 1971, he was inside the store. So was a young Navy man who'd had car trouble that night. Suddenly, two men with guns approached, ripping the phone out of the wall. You can see the receiver is gone in these photos. And those two men began to rob the store.
And then they herded the two men inside where they shot both of them in the legs.
One bullet hit Mark's artery and he bled to death. The customer survived. He was able to give detectives a description. Both men were young, likely early 20s and African American. One was around 6 foot, but the other was around 5'10" and had 2 scars under his right eye and 1 scar under his left eye. Detective Sergeant Jimmy Watson with the Columbia County Sheriff's Office is working this cold case. He was able to track down evidence buried deep in storage in Tallahassee, and he tracked down the surviving witness. Though he's now in his 70s, he still has a vivid memory of that night.
He said that he believed the gun was a .32 caliber revolver. He said he was very familiar with weapons and that it was that type of weapon.
It is also important to remember in 1971, I-10 was not complete. It ended outside of Lake City, so Sergeant Watson believes the men were likely local to Northeast Florida somewhere. Looking at all of these factors, he doesn't believe this was the men's first robbery. But unfortunately, records for armed robberies are often not kept, especially after 40 years. So Sergeant Watson is hoping retired law enforcement might remember a crime or suspects matching this description.
If people remember cases similar to this back from around that time frame, or if agencies have cases that are similar to this from around that time frame, that could also provide me with some really good leads.
Laura knows seeing her father's case solved is a long shot. Even if the men only meant to rob her father and shot him in the legs to stop him from chasing them, it doesn't change the fact that he died.
I'd just like to know, what were you thinking in your heart? What were you thinking at that moment? You changed so many people's lives at that moment. You know, I have 3 sons and 6 grandchildren. My older brother has a daughter and 2 granddaughters. My other brother has 2 daughters and a granddaughter. My father never got to see any of this.
If you were in the area the night Mark Brotherton was murdered, or that suspect description sounds familiar, Sergeant Watson would like to hear from you. Call the Columbia County Sheriff's Office or Crime Stoppers. Katie Jeffries with photographer Jeff Renfro, First Coast News, on your side.
All right. So there we go. Another great segment that you and Jeff did back in the day. It was awesome to have those photos of the
Hmm.
gas station and all the newspaper clippings that Laura brought and the images of her dad. I mean, it really tells a story, when we can put all that stuff together. Um, I remember back when my dad was murdered that I always hoped that there was some kind of distinguishing feature of the suspect that law enforcement had, in their back pocket. That if somebody called and said, "Hey, this person talked," or this person admitted something to me, that they could say, "Oh yeah, he has the limp or the scars or the tattoo or whatever it was that would separate him from everybody else." And this case had that. I mean, somebody knows about this guy that has two scars under one eye and another scar on the other.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, that's such a distinguishing feature, and especially someone who had a history, because like they believe this was not the first time they had robbed a gas station or committed a robbery. So someone who has that criminal history, and then has those distinguishing scars. I mean, that narrows the pool.
yeah, yeah. And I'm sure, obviously, like the detective said, if somebody could come forward, like law enforcement, that maybe was a robbery detective that had that same description. I mean, it's just, that's what you're looking for, is somebody, again, the face tattoo or a missing leg, like
Yeah.
something that's distinguishing and separates them from everybody else that, out there. And they had that, but nobody ever came forward.
No, and it was in the paper. I don't know television wise if it was on the local news back then or not.
Yeah.
But I thought what was interesting too is thinking back to that time when I-10 wasn't even finished yet. So they believed that these people were probably local somewhere to our area because I-10 didn't go like I-10 does now.
Yeah.
So they would probably be from either the Lake City or the Jacksonville or Gainesville, somewhere within our area.
Yeah. It kind of eliminates the thought that it's just somebody cruising down, from Florida to California on I-10 and just random stop.
Hmm.
Um, because they knew how to get around once they left. I remember that being a big thing, is they were,
They left on foot.
yeah, they left on foot. So, even if you have a car somewhere, like, you got to kind of know your way around. So, this, again, 1971, I think if it's not the oldest case that you've put on Unsolved, it's got to be up there. And like Laura mentions in the segment, like, she realizes that it's a long shot, to solve it, not because there's not information out there, and the detective was talking about evidence too, but are the suspects still alive?
Right.
I mean, you can still solve it without, resolve it without solving it, I guess, without having their day in court. But that was one of the things, Laura really wanted, was to be able to ask why. And, she, it's mentioned in there, like, if you just meant to shoot him in the legs so that, he couldn't chase after you, you still killed a man, and whether it was intentional or not, I mean,
You took him away from his family, and you saw that her brothers, he never got to see her children, her brother's children, everything after that point in his family, that was all kind of taken away.
yeah. And I mean, you saw that picture. That was a large family gathering that photo was taken from. And, I just, I think, for the people out there that are watching that have not been impacted by this kind of loss, I mean, you know, that's what we're talking about here, is, like, 50 years later, that the family still, there's grandchildren and great grandchildren that are impacted, that never got to meet their family member. All of those events that happened in Laura's life, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Graduating, getting married, going to school, getting jobs, having children, all of those things that she didn't have her father there with her.
Yeah, and he sounded like, I mean, a great guy. Loved his family. He would take them out at the farm. He was a founding
Founding
member of
church.
one of the
Yeah.
churches, which is a pretty large church now here in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
He served in World War II.
Yeah.
You know, he was very active in the community, and unfortunately, the wrong people walked into his gas station that night.
Yeah. And remember the other victim, there was another customer that was shot.
Yeah.
He survived and was still alive, and the detective had, recently reached out to him. Oh, he's in his 70s now, and and I think he was a Navy guy.
Yeah, he was a young Navy guy, and I think he had car trouble, and that's why he was in the gas station. I don't know if he was using a phone or what it was,
Yeah.
but he was there in that gas station, and he was also shot but lived, and that's of course how they got the witness descriptions.
Right. And I remember, those old newspaper clippings like listed, the guy's name, and we were going to reach out to him, and then law enforcement already had. And he said he was still able to provide, accurate information. And but you wonder about, the impact that it had on his life as well. You know what I mean? Like, that's a traumatic event to be, in a gas station, and when it's robbed and you be shot and witness somebody else dying. And people don't, we think about crimes in terms of like today, like robbing a gas station and there being surveillance, and that somebody just jumps on their cell phone and calls, and that's not 1971.
No.
You saw the phone, there was a pay phone that the receiver was ripped out of the wall. I can't remember exactly how it happened, but I think other customers came in and found them.
Yeah, I think somebody stopped maybe for gas or for something, and they saw them inside the store.
Yeah.
So that's how the scene was discovered.
Yeah, exactly. And then they had to go somewhere to actually call police because there was no phone. Again, no cell phones, and not a gas station on every corner. And so, there were a lot of factors in that case that made it difficult for investigators, just in getting a start and looking. And Lake City's still not that big, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
back then it was, before I-10 was really running through it, it was particularly kind of small and rural,
Yeah, and that gas station is still there.
Yeah.
Because we were wondering if it would even be there when we went out to that intersection, and it was. The gas station itself is still there. Of course, different ownership, different outside, but it's still there.
Yeah, those pictures are, we don't get stuff like that anymore, which is kind of weird. You would think now with everybody with their cell phone videos and cameras out but like the scene with the tape and, the officers walking, around it. And like, I don't know, there's something about those old photos that is eerie, that they're, that captured that moment in time. And then, and we're still looking at it,
Yeah. Now you're still going back and kind of circling to this case just to get some answers for the family.
Yeah. We reached out to Laura, to let her know that we were going to be, talking about her dad's case again and re-showing that on the Facebook Live. And so she was really appreciative. I don't know that she was going to be able to join in, but I know that, like, she just had these, still to this day, just still curious, still wants to know, I mean, obviously her, she made a good life for herself, and she did survived and thrived, and, and is a wonderful woman from what we, got to be around her and talk to her. But, always in the back, when people say that, just get over it, or time heals all wounds or something. I mean, this is kind of one of those instances where you can look at her and, and realize that like it doesn't go away. She's still wishing for justice and wanting somebody to come forward and help answer these questions that she's had all this time.
Yeah, and I know that the sergeant there that we spoke to, I mean, he's very dedicated. He knew a lot about the case. He had, I want to say, gone to Tallahassee to try and track down more information about it too. So I know he would love to see it solved and give the family some closure as well.
Yeah. I want to. I still think one day you need to do an update on all. You know what I mean? And go back through all these unsolveds that we've done and get get the latest status. I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of them, we go back and we watch them and we hear, investigators saying, like, we have evidence that we're testing now, that is being retested. Now we've got, the tool of genetic genealogy as an option out there, and it can be expensive, but there are options out there. We've helped a number of law enforcement agencies out with securing funding or helping with funding, for genetic genealogy. And, if the case is able to use it as, eligible, so to speak, and has enough DNA, then, we reach out to us. If you're law enforcement, we'll try to help. And if you're a survivor, mention it to your detective. I mean, we've been telling people a lot of times, like call them up and ask for an update, and then just ask the question: Is my loved one's case eligible for genetic genealogy? That's the newest tool out there that they're using, but it's very specific. Obviously, you have to have DNA, and you have to have a decent amount of DNA, to be able to do that. And the agency has to have some resources and some funding. So, but it's an easy call to make, and just a couple of questions, to ask. And we're seeing, case after case solved using that technology.
And it never hurts to even ask them, if the anniversary of your loved one's case is coming up, will you send out a press release to local news to maybe run something about my loved one's story? Because we've gotten some of those releases, and we will run those, especially when they come from law enforcement. So It never, the worst you can get is no. So It never hurts to ask.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, now has been a really bad time to have anything news related that isn't, COVID.
Coronavirus related.
Yeah. We tell our families that, like, because we've had conversations with you. You guys are not out doing in-person interviews, or they're super rare. It's everybody has new restrictions, and, we're all trying to do the best we can. But it's, obviously it's difficult. We were having a conversation before we went live that some of the detectives we know, like, we were really worried that, like, cold case work was going to come to a stop because, what could they do? They couldn't even go into their office. But a lot of them really did just kind of grab case files and start reviewing them and start digging deeper into things, and, doing some internet searches and some, phone calls that are things that are harder to do when you're constantly, in and out of the office and running down this lead and that lead. And so we've had a number of law enforcement agencies reach out to families, and families reach out to us and tell us, like, yeah, they called me out of the blue and gave me an update, and nothing, actually, not yet. At least nobody has called to say, hey, they solved our case while we were stuck in quarantine. Katie, we got a couple of questions coming in. I've been doing a lot of Q&As, and I think some people, have really been enjoying it. And since I got you here too, like, I think some of these questions are good for both of us. This one asks, can a family be denied a copy of the homicide and/or autopsy report? I know of someone whose father was murdered in the early 70s, and her family's been denied everything. So
I wouldn't think so. I think that would be under public record, especially from the 1970s. If it's still an active case, then maybe they can hold that back. At least, for us, sometimes we can't get information if something is still active. The 1970s, probably not still an active case. That should be public record.
Yeah, I think my guess, Karen, is that law enforcement agency is calling that case active. And what you need to know is it active, or are they just calling it active?
Right.
Because that's kind of the loophole in that public records law. And again, I think earlier you mentioned, I'm not sure where this case is, Karen, but every state has their own public records laws as well. But basically, like, kind of universally, is an active investigation is exempt from public records. And autopsy reports are something that typically aren't released to families especially in open investigations. So it doesn't surprise me that it's been denied, but the real question is figuring out whether the case is actually active or whether they're just using that as an excuse, as a loophole in not releasing that information to the family. Like you said, Katie, I mean, a 1970 case. Oh, it's in Florida. Karen just responded. The case is in Florida, but I mean, a 1970 case does not seem like anybody should be holding that information. I mean, if you haven't,
No, that
been
seems
able to
far too
solve
old.
it,
Mhm.
yeah, it seems like they're being unreasonably, adversarial. And I don't know the whole background, obviously, but maybe there's been a rift between the family and law enforcement, or maybe there's something else we don't know. But that certainly doesn't seem like it would be a problem for a case so old. You might be asked to pay for it. I mean,
Yeah, we've had to do that.
Yeah, we've had to pay for records before. And Laura did join us. So,
Hey, Laura.
thank you. She's watching and crying. Laura, we really appreciate that you came and you were interviewed, and you shared your story with us and shared your pictures, and those newspaper clippings. And, here at Project Cold Case, we don't, our goal is to raise awareness. Our goal is to advocate for families. And so it's one thing to be able to do that with Katie's help in the Unsolved segment. But then once that airs, we're always still looking for ways to put it back out there. And this is one of the ways that we're able to do that. And so, this was, again, I mean, Lake City is not that far, from here. And that detective was, I mean, Katie, we've had conversations, off of camera, and, and I remember you talking about how, how he was really interested. And like you said, I think he went to, I think there was evidence that was being stored in
somewhere in
Tallahassee.
Tallahassee.
Yeah. And he went and got it. And so, it was, anyway, Laura, we're not going to stop. We'll continue to help raise awareness for this until either you tell us not to, Laura, or until you get that phone call, that somebody's been identified. And so, I mean, that's the commitment that we make at Project Cold Case, and that's the partnership that we have with Katie and with First Coast News and the Unsolved series, is that we're going to put the stories out there, and we're kind of limited in what we can do, but that's something we can do, and we'll keep playing them and keep showing them and keep figuring out ways to share these stories until they're either solved or until a family says stop.
Yeah, I think it's important. You never know who's watching, who's going to share the story online. Like we said, we were really hoping to reach out to retired law enforcement. We know that they tend to keep up with the news. Yeah. So hopefully someone maybe reached out to Sergeant Murray. We can hope. But he was very into the case and very dedicated to it. So I know he'd love to see it solved.
Yeah, definitely. And, one of the things we see, unfortunately, is some turnover in law enforcement, and that's always hard on families. So hopefully he's still there and he's still in charge of that case. But Laura says she's never going to stop. She knows somebody knows something. I mean, somebody knows, a man that matches that description, that has the scars, and is that height, that gender, that race, and was in and around that area at that time.
And probably has a criminal record of some kind.
Yeah, exactly. And may have been known to rob gas stations, and been caught, doing it back then. Again, those records were,
they just didn't keep them, unfortunately. I mean, which you can't fault them. You can't keep everything from the 1970s. They had murder files, but they didn't have armed robbery files.
Yeah. So I don't know, but Laura, we'll keep getting this story out there. We're not gonna forget about your dad and your struggle. And Katie, we appreciate that you continue to, to feature these families and these stories and sharing them. Now you got an Emmy to go with all that hard work, and hopefully another one.
We're submitting a set of Emmy awards this week, so we'll see. Hopefully, we'll win another one.
Yeah, well, good luck. Fingers crossed. Anybody that watched that segment, again, that was in Lake City, Florida, which was the Columbia County Sheriff's Office, right, Katie? And,
yep.
And I think the phone number for them was at the end of that segment, so you can always rewind this and go back and look and see if you have information. And we have, contact us if you need that contact information, and we'll do, whatever we can to put you in touch with the right people. Katie, I know you're home and, you've got a busy life getting ready to add one more to the house. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I love talking about these cases. And even though I will be on maternity leave for a short time, I'll be back and we'll be doing more unsolveds later.
Yeah. So don't think just because you don't see Katie for a little while that that she's abandoned us. No, she's taking care of a newborn, or will be. So Katie, I'll be talking to you, I know, but from all of us here and all the families that you help, thank you again, and please stay safe and healthy, and we can't wait to see your little one when he's here.
Thank you. I can't wait for him to be here. I'm ready.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us tonight. I'm going to be doing a presentation for the Tallahassee Museum tomorrow via Zoom. You can check it out on our Facebook page. There's a link to it. It's a free event. You can register. You have to pre-register, and they'll send you the link. But I'll be doing that tomorrow night from 6 to 7. So if you want to join us for that, you can go to the Tallahassee Museum's Facebook page or our Facebook page and sign up to watch. And I'll be talking a little bit about Project Cold Case and my own dad's case, and maybe mentioning some Tallahassee cases that are of note. So tune into that if you'd like. Thanks again, Katie. We hope to see you real soon.
Thank you. See you guys later.
Bye.